Episode 4 of Winning Time, the rise of the Lakers Dynasty is over, and we're here to talk about it. I am Jose Salviati, editor at the Peach Basket, and I lived through the 80s Showtime era.
Yep, and I'm Derek Lavelle. I didn't live through it, but as a diehard Laker fan, it's great to now see winning basketball again.
And I'm Evan Moore, and I did also live through the era. And you can follow me on Twitter at morehoops727.
And I will remind everybody again, it's Moore, and it's a great follow. Absolutely jump on that right away. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. We're certainly going to talk about the episode, but we'd love to hear from you, get your thoughts, let us know where we're right, wrong, or what you thought about the episode overall. I thought this was a great episode, one of the best so far. It left me very nostalgic. We'll talk about that. But we want to hear from you if you're joining us on Twitter. Unfortunately, we can't get your comments there. So if you could just jump to Facebook, just search for the Peach Basket 2021. You'll find us. You can leave your comments, questions, and our thoughts about the episode there. Again, we'd love to hear from you. In episode 4, the Lakers all make their way to Palm Springs for training camp. The Lakers begrudgingly settle on Jack McKinney as their coach, while Jeannie Buss and the team head to the forum, start to develop what will be known as Showtime. We're introduced in this episode to Michael Cooper, Ron Boone, Mark Landisberger, and others. Really, all the Lakers were represented there, but those are the ones who kind of stood out a little bit in this episode. So, with that as kind of an introduction, again, I thought this was a really fun episode. But let's hear everybody's thoughts. Derek, you're up first. What do you think of episode 4?
This was a very interesting episode because what really stood out to me was the unlikability of the two main characters, right? So the first 3 episodes, we kind of fell in love with them, right? Dr. Buss and Magic, they're very charismatic, they're engaging. You fall in love with them immediately. Like they're the type where you meet them at a party or you meet them at a gathering, you walk away, you're like, man, they're even better than what they're seeing on TV. But for this episode, you kind of see the darker side, right? How the episode opens up with Dr. Buss with, a different woman than his wife, and his entire family catches him, right? And then you see with Magic, and in Magic, you were seeing that side of him needing to be loved and him need to be wanted and him need to be appreciated by everyone else around him. Where he's thinking he's unselfish, but really he's selfish, as Cookie points out, right? In that phone call.
Yeah.
And so what I thought was very interesting throughout, through this episode was with focusing on the main characters and saying, hey, this was not always rosy. This wasn't always perfect. That quite frankly, they have a lot of demons and they had to go through a lot of obstacles. We know the end result, but what I thought was really interesting was kind of showing like, yeah, these two guys weren't always beloved by everybody, that they were hated. And that's why my favorite line was actually what Cookie said, was like Magic when he was on the phone with her and he was talking about like, yeah, everyone from Michigan State loved me. We were a brotherhood. And Cookie was like, no, like they were a brotherhood in front of your face. But in reality, they hated your guts. The reason why they didn't say it was because they were winning. And I think Magic realized in that moment, he's like, oh my God. He's like, maybe I'm not as beloved or lovable as I thought I was. And maybe I'm more selfish than I thought I was. Now he reacted naturally to that type of truth because he's 20 years old. But that was something that really stood out to me this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. No, outstanding. So many thoughts. Again, so much nostalgia. Yeah. Evan, go ahead, man. What'd you think? What'd you take out of this episode?
I mean, there was so many things. I mean, my favorite part of this episode really was Jack McKinney. Like, I mean, it was a really cool representation of him. And like, he's, very businesslike, but like, very likable guy too. And, his speech where he's like comparing, his system to jazz and everything like that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And it was so great seeing Michael Cooper and also seeing Wanda Cooper as well, because she's actually really important as well. She's a really important wife that, was very involved with the team and helping out. So yeah, it's really cool that they've, involved her, and the guy that's playing Cooper doing a great job. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
all this casting, like
Yeah.
I've been, yeah, it's been really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
whoever's the casting director, they need to get a pay raise because
yeah,
they nailed it. They
Yeah.
nailed it for each and every person.
absolutely. And then the other thing that I really loved was Kareem hazing Magic, because that that was apparently like, Kareem had a big reputation of being
Yeah.
really rough on rookies. And he was like, apparently, and he was really doing that to Magic just to mess with him, no other reason, just, like, you're the rookie, I'm going to make you work for it. And like, even when you bring me that fresh squeezed orange juice, it ain't good enough because you brought me the LA Times. And
Right.
that's not a paper in his mind. I mean, yeah, I thought that was great because I've always loved the dynamic between the two of them. It's, one is so serious, and then the other one is just so like always smiling and fun loving, and like
Yeah.
just the way they worked out. It just, yeah. So, and then also the other thing I really liked about this episode was Jason Segel as Paul Westhead.
Mhm.
Because like he was kind of like that, just kind of
Mhm.
a little timid a little bit, but like, that was a really good representation. I really enjoyed this episode a lot.
Yeah. All right. My turn. I'll try and keep it short. There was so much, here that I enjoyed. Evan, you brought this up, one of the earlier episodes about the credit goes to McKinney. And what I really enjoyed about this episode is they are giving the credit to McKinney. And I think a lot of Laker fans right now who are watching the show might have heard of him, might have known something about him, but don't know that he was the architect for this thing. He was the guy who turned, right, the old analogy, right? You don't turn a speeding train or a speeding boat quickly, right? You turn it slowly, right? And the NBA was going in a particular direction, and the way they depicted that was so great. And if you look at tape from the '60s, it's so wild. It's like a different game. You literally see players go to their spots and they stay there. There's no moving around.
Yep.
They stay in their spots because that's their spot. And I think it was Jamal Wilkes, in this episode where he said, "Hey, I'm in my spot." And McKinney said, "There are no spots, man. We're water. We flow." And he really literally started that U-turn, right? Which took decades to complete. But he's the architect of it. And it's great seeing him get a little bit of credit. So I thought that was spectacular. I know that we don't want to go down the 2022 Lakers rabbit hole, but I watched I watched one thing in the episode today that reminded me of it. McKinney was in the car with his wife. This is before he got the job, and he was talking about how I maybe blew it. I maybe asked for too much, and he said, the team it's perfect. They're just too good. And she sarcastically goes, "Oh, it sounds horrible." And he said, "It will be if it doesn't work." And I immediately thought of the 2022 Lakers. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Apologies.
I thought of it. I had the same thought in that same moment. I have to say,
You know the same thing. On paper, this year looked great, but it
exactly.
just didn't work out. I'm sorry. We won't go down the rabbit hole. We will not do
No,
that.
I think it had to be said because, yeah,
But
like,
yeah,
I
It had
think
to
we
be
were all
said.
thinking the same
It had to
thing.
be
yeah.
said.
Right on. We're all thinking it. I said it. Okay. So yeah, I love that. For me, and Derek and I were talking a little bit before we started. I always, well, always and never are not great words to use often, but I'll say, because I can't think of a better one. I generally hate, it's probably better, watching, sports movies. Sports documentaries are awesome, but sports movies where actors try to do what the greats did, they always fall short, But what they're doing really, really good in this series is the cover. The video looks grainy. Even today, they made sense of it by Pat Riley saying, "Oh, it came out kind of green," and Derek called out as as a director, he looks at it from a different perspective. They use a lot of cut scenes and stuff, but I thought the play looked good. It looked okay. Oftentimes you watch gameplay acted out, and that's where you lose the reality of it. You lose the fantasy. Oh, I'm watching a show now, as opposed to I'm watching something depicted that's telling me something about these guys that I grew up watching. But watching this today, I really felt like I was watching Palm Springs close practice. I mean, pretty much. The sky hook wasn't quite there, but nobody does that. But it was really, really fun. And watching that moment at the end, where they're pitching the concept of the Laker girls, and I have thoughts on the Laker girls, which I'll save for another time, I think, in 2022. But Jerry West just leans back and says, "It's showtime." That really got to me. I thought that was cool to see, like, really the beginning. Right now, we're starting to really kind of ramp up a little bit. And there was a scene where McKinney, called out the starting five. Right, he said, "Norm, Magic, you're on the same team. Who's running point? Whoever's got the ball. Coop, you're running with them. Silk, you're running with them, and Kareem." And man, listen, I didn't get goosebumps. I'm not going to over dramatize this, but I got pretty excited. I'm not even going to lie. I just hearing that called out, hearing that depicted in that show was kind of cool for me, because those are the guys I grew up watching. Man. Those are the guys I grew up watching. So yeah, overall, I really, really, really enjoyed the episode. The one last thing that kind of stuck with me, and again, Derek and I were talking just before we started, every human probably, goes through a moment in their life when, they're looking at their checkbook and they're looking at their bills and they're freaking out a little bit. Everybody does that. It happens to everybody. Hopefully it's a moment in time and not a forever thing. But watching that happened to Dr. Bus when he was in Palm Springs, just living his best life and eating lobster, wearing a Speedo. I just thought that was amazing with the bib on. That was just funny. And he asks the lady, right? He goes, how much are we gonna make? Give me best effort, best guess. I'm not gonna hold you to the numbers. He's going thinking 3 million, 2 million. She goes, 1.3, 1.2. But don't hold me to that. That that would don't bet on that. That's not likely. It's not possible. And the panic, right, that set in.
Yeah.
I never knew. Obviously, nobody knew. How could we know? Yeah. And I wonder how much of that is true. I can't help but think it's partially true, right? That there was, he was in a little bit over his head. He came in with some debt, and basically everything was riding on Magic Johnson, Kareem, Silk, Norm, all of that working. McKinney, all of that had to work. And of course, looking back on it, it did, but he didn't know that at the time. So it was wild. I thought that was a pretty interesting scene that really stuck out to me. But overall, loved it. This episode got me nostalgic, and I really enjoyed watching it. All right, so now we've got training camp out of the way. We've got the coach for now, because we all know what's coming. What do you see coming in episode 5, Derek? What do you got?
I think we're gonna get your favorite moment and Evan's favorite moment, and I think a lot of that generation's favorite moment. It's Magic's first game. I think that's what we're gonna get. I think we're gonna get Magic's first game. Unfortunately, this is the part of the story for a lot of Laker fans and for anyone who read the Showtime book. This is the sad part of the movie. This is the part where Bambi's parents die. Like, we know we know what happens to, unfortunately, Jack, who I think won the episode. That something bad's about to happen, and there's about to be some major chaos. But I think a lot of it's going to focus on the way this episode was, that I highlighted how, like, Magic realizing that, maybe people don't like him, that he thinks like him, right? Because he thinks that, oh, if I give you the ball, you like me, you love me. and he's trying to break through that, right? And we all saw the fight that ended the episode.
Yeah.
A lot of the tension that, everyone on the team doesn't like him because, by the way, that fight in the locker room, or argument in the locker room, when think about that. He's by far the youngest guy in the room, and for him to sit there to say, look at all these guys who hate him and loathe him, and quite frankly are a lot jealous of him, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it comes from envy and jealousy. For him to sit there and say, I make more money than all of you except Kareem, is pretty gutsy, because that kind of shows you the arrogance of Magic, to sit there and say, hey, you know, hate me, love me, say what you want about me, but I make more money, and money talks. And I'm here for the long haul. If you don't like me because of that, that's a you problem, not a me problem. So
Yeah.
I think, I think next episode is going to really focus on the transition, of trying to now morph this new offense with kind of what the old NBA is about, as well as really highlighting what Magic's first game, as well as, now the Showtime, the Laker girls, all that. I think now we're getting into the start of the season, and
Yeah.
now we're going to try to start to get into the Showtime.
Yeah. One thing I want to call out, and Evan, you can back me on this because I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. But it wasn't specifically Ron Boone, but I have heard Jamal Wilkes say that in early practices in Palm Springs, Magic would throw passes that nobody was expecting and hit people in the back
Mm-hmm.
of the head.
Yep.
So that when I watched that, I was like, yes, I've heard this,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it was in the book. Unfortunately, unlike you two, I haven't read it, but I know that
Yeah, no.
happened.
Yeah, James Worthy tells a story. He tells a story that his first practice, Magic beams him in the back of the head, beams him right in the back of the head, and Magic's like, "I see you. Next time, catch the ball." He didn't
Right.
say those words. He didn't say the words exactly the way I say it, but pretty much is basically that's what it was.
A little
So,
more
like you
colorful,
said,
probably.
a little more
Yeah, Magic.
colorful, but
Yeah, and Magic was well known for doing that pretty much throughout his whole career. Of just like, if you weren't prepared for it, especially there in practice, because he's trying,
mhm.
more risky things in practice
Right,
too. So
right.
like, like there was throughout his whole era, there's stories of that, of like him beating people with the ball like that. Because if you don't have your head on a swivel around him, and you're gonna get beat.
Yeah. That's awesome. It was great watching that, knowing that that it had happened. Evan, what do you see coming in episode 5?
I think you know Derek touched on it a little bit. I think what we're gonna start to see is there was really a rift that started to, and you started to see it with the locker room there with Magic and the guys, but the rift that really like is a wedge between him and the guys that was always hard for him to get over was his relationship with Bus. And
Yeah.
you saw a little bit of that in that speech, and that's him kind of
Right.
like fluffing out and like saying you I am kind of the big dog around here, and Bus has got my back. And like a lot of guys did not like that. And so like I think we're going to really start to see like Magic's going to really struggle with that, of these guys don't really like me, because that's really important to Magic. Magic really
Right.
needs to be liked. And so yeah, that's what I'm really looking forward to. And you know anyway.
Yeah. No. That's perfect. I agree. I think what makes Magic so interesting. I think it was the Ron Boone character again called out the fact that he's always smiling, right? And I know that generally had to have rubbed people the wrong way. I think of Dwight Howard, right? Dwight Howard came in, same kind of smile, same kind of smile that kind of lit up a room, happy-go-lucky guy, same kind of addiction, if we will, that Magic had too. But I think of them, and please no, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
align between Magic and Dwight Howard. I'm just saying they were both that kind of gregarious type of personality. But Dwight seemed to rub people the wrong way, whereas Magic, at least from the outside, we didn't see that. So I think, yeah, a lot of that was happening. This kind of stuff we saw with, with White and kind of alienating people, I think happened with Magic too, which I never knew. As a fan watching the game, I just thought these guys, were just pals and they got along together. But
this is
there
stuff
was
I learned after
definitely
the fact.
yeah, it was pretty interesting. And to see that kind of develop and to see how, at the end of the day, winning fixes everything. So to see how that all kind of meshes together will be fascinating. My hope is that they dive deep into that, San Diego Clipper game. We talked a lot about it, as we recap a lot of these games as the first game of the season where Kareem hits a skyhook from the free throw line to win a meaningless game, but Magic hugged him like they just won the finals. I actually watched the last 15 minutes of that game on YouTube just because I wanted to. And it was so fun, man. If you guys haven't done it, do it. Because it was super fun to watch. And it's amazing how good the basketball was back then. Just right off the gate. It was really, really good. But yeah, I would love to see that played out. I would love to see, the locker room after that to see what we don't know. And obviously, what Derek hinted at, the unfortunate, move from McKinney to Westhead. I think we'll start to see. They started to plant the seeds of that when you saw him running and coughing, which I don't think it had anything to do with his own health. If I remember right, it was just a bike accident. But
it was a bike accident,
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, overall, man, again, I just can't keep going back to great episode. If it's anything like this one where, we're really kind of digging into what I remember seeing, episodes 5 is going to be great. Derek, I think you've already said this, but I'm going to give you the shot. Who's your winner, episode 4?
It's gotta be Jack McKinney. Like, honestly, the father of the fast break has been kind of passed around. Red Auerbach started it with the Celtics. I think Paul Westhead, as I think Evan pointed out, he gets kind of like a lot of the credit, not just with his time with the Lakers, but when he went to college and how he kind of revolutionized how he really took it to the next level. And then obviously as we continue forward with this, Mike D'Antoni, 7 Seconds or Less Suns, now with this new generation of Warriors, with Steph, Clay, Draymond, and Steve Kerr, like looking back and seeing kind of like, oh my, like I think people from my generations are gonna look at this and be like, wait a minute, you guys didn't always play like this, right? Like basketball wasn't always played at this fast pace. Like, like when we watched The Last Dance, I think a lot of people were just like, oh yeah, that was archaic. But then you realize to really go deep into the weeds and see, not just because you would think a lot of people would think like coaches, GMs would be the ones that would say, you can't run this type of offense. This is stupid. No, it's the players. The players are the ones who are rebelling against this. The players are the ones who are saying, no, coach. You would like he was trying to help them, and they were the one that was like, nah, this is not for, we don't want this. We don't want more shots, more points, and then inevitably more money. Like we don't want that. We don't want that. We want want less shot. Like when he like hearing him make speaking analytics, talking about 3 plays, taking what was it 59 seconds, and he said 2 out of 3, we made 2 out of 3 shots, and just hearing analytics, you're just saying, oh my, you're like, oh my God.
That averages out to 100 points a game, which is what the league average is. And you know why? That's because everyone in the league runs the same plays, does the same thing. That was epic. Sorry.
It was unbelievable. I literally had to pause it. I had to pause it because I was like, because my brain for 1 second was like, this is not, you got to remember, this is 1979. And this is like the DeLorean getting created and going back in time. Like this is like next level. This is next level stuff he's saying in 1979. And you look at the faces of the players. They were just like, what is he saying? Like, what's this math? I don't care about this math. How can I score points? And how can we win games so I can make more money? That's all these guys care about. So for me, obviously we know that he becomes a footnote in history because of what ends up happening to him, unfortunately. So I'm happy. Honestly, I'm really happy he was able to get basically an episode and a half of shine, and quite frankly, respect for all the hard work and being a true visionary. And a lot of credit to Jerry West too for having the guts to kind of see with him what he eventually would come to be of the Showtime Lakers to really make this happen. So I give a lot of credit, but obviously Jack McKinney gets the nod for me for the winner of this episode.
Evan, who's your winner?
Yeah, I got to go with the same one. Like the best part for me was the exchange between him and Jerry West. And he's talking about the only time that I've ever, felt this way was, with basketball. And like Jerry West's response was, oh, floating. And it was like, yeah, it was like that. And then the scene where he's like, planning it out and like floating in his chair and everything like that.
That was so cool.
I love that. Cause like that's a sentiment I can absolutely relate to. Like, that's the one place where I've felt that too is basketball. So,
and what made that so amazing for me, right? As an athlete, I was never a professional, never even came close to being a professional, but I played multiple sports, and there was always a time when you knew that you were really, really playing well because everything went in slow motion, right? There was a time, when I was playing a game and I just saw what was going to happen before it happened. I mean, it's silly to say it, but I did, right? And what I saw happened, and everybody else didn't move, and I moved. And there is that weird feeling, out of body, levitation. I don't, it's all silly maybe, but I get it, right? I'm not a horse rider, but it's the first thing I thought of. A couple of times that I've ridden a horse, first you're riding and it hurts, but when they start galloping, you feel like you're flying, man. You don't feel it anymore. Same when you're skiing on powder, you feel like you're just flying. And so that analogy that really hit home with me because I feel like I had, kind of seen that, experienced it. And he was just talking about his nirvana, right? He's talking about his, when I'm locked in, this is it. This is as good as it gets for me. And to see him play that out and then levitating in the chair. Yeah, that was amazing. Listen, 3 for 3, Jack McKinney wins the episode. I had to look it up. I recognize the actor, but I don't know him. Tracy Letts is his name. Absolute shout out to Tracy Letts for his depiction of Jack McKinney. Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Yeah. Overall, great episode. Super fun, especially on the heels of the 2022 game that we all witnessed. This was a nice way to end the night. That'll do it. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Again, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week to recap episode 5. We'll talk then.